Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Interventions and Detentions. I'm your host, Brad, coming at you solo this week with what I feel like could be an interesting topic. We're just going to jump right into it. It is called The Power of No. Why it is so hard to say no and why it matters. Welcome back, everyone. Like I said, this is kind of an interesting theme. It's one I just thought of this week because, honestly, I've been taking on a lot of side gigs lately, and every time I run into somebody that kind of asks me, like, hey, man, are you picking up another side gig, and you're doing this, and you're doing that, and what don't you do? And lately, my comeback to them is, I don't say no. And I think I need to learn how to say no sometimes. It's just amazing because, I love to be busy and I love to help out. But saying no versus saying yes is hard for me to do. It's a struggle. I say yes to a lot of things. Like I said, I like to help. I like to be involved. I like to be busy. I don't like to just sit around. I struggle with that sometimes. Even when I'm dog tired and dragging, I still, need stuff to do. So again, saying no just adds more to my plate and takes away time from other things that I need to probably start prioritizing a little bit. And I'm hoping maybe through this episode, I can do a little self-evaluation and maybe even help you listeners self-evaluate where you're at right now when it comes to either saying no or saying yes. For me personally, I've got a lot of, obviously responsibilities with being a principal. There's a lot of just the day-to-day stuff that comes with being a principal. But like I said, on top of that, I do driver's education after school, not every day, but a couple times a week, sometimes on the weekends, enough to keep me busy. I drive school bus. I had signed up to do that when Meredith, our youngest, was in sports at Central Noble, and I thought it would be a good way for me to make a little money on the side, but also, I feel like if I was going to her events already, I might as well get paid for it, right? So I signed up to drive bus, and guess what? I said, I'll drive volleyball this year because, no one have anything else to do, I guess, which that's not true. I probably do, but she's graduated. She's not playing anymore. So I don't even have a kid in the game, skin in the game, and I'm driving bus. And I've actually gone on and jumped into some other ventures of just helping out from time to time, either bus driving or just whatever. It's a weakness of mine, not a strength, because it stretches me thin, and it stretches you thin when you don't say no. So, if your plate's already pretty full, we need to kind of step back sometime. I need to kind of step back and try to figure out how to find a little more balance. Like I said, I love helping out, love lending a hand whenever someone needs it, but it just takes away from other things in my life that I need to make probably a better priority. So again, maybe through this episode, it might enlighten you to become more aware of saying no versus saying yes. Again, for me, every time I say yes, I feel like I'm doing the right thing in that moment. I do it to be helpful, stepping up, showing people that I'm reliable. But, when you think about it, the reality is all of those yeses add up. And again, they just take away time from other things. And when you spread yourself that thin, something eventually suffers, whether it's other jobs or your main job or most importantly, your family life and your family balance. Something's got to give. Sometimes it's your energy. Sometimes it's your energy. Again, family, your job. There's something that's gonna, it's gonna suffer. It's not going to be in first place anymore. It's going to be taking a back seat. So today, I want to unpack all that. What happens when you can't say no? What are the real costs professionally, personally, relationally? And how do we learn to give ourselves permission to say no without guilt? And I think for me, that's probably the toughest lesson that I need to figure out. So maybe you guys can help me with that along the way. So why do people struggle to say no? I think we all have a desire to help and to serve. I feel like I have a really big desire to be a servant, no matter what it is. If it's in my job, it's in, outside of school, my family. I like to serve. I like to solve problems. I like to help. So that desire to help each other really takes away from being able to say no at times. You feel like you're letting people down. If somebody comes to you and asks you, hey, can you help me with this? Or Brad, I really need you to do this. You don't want to say no, right? I mean, I don't want to say no. You feel like you're letting them down. And to me, that weighs heavy on my shoulders a lot of times. So I think that is, for me, a big reason why I don't say no a lot. You also worry about missing out, or not being that team player. Like, if you just say, no, I can't, you walk away, then you're done with it. And maybe that's not a bad thing. But for me, I need that for some reason. I kind of thrive on it. So, especially I think educators and teachers, we're kind of in that culture of sacrifice. Like, we sacrifice a lot for either the good of the cause or the good of our teammate or the good of the school. We go that extra mile because it's really what is expected of us a lot of times. It's very unspoken that teachers, educators, principals, parapros, all of us that work and serve children, I feel like we've got that calling to just go the extra mile. We spend so much time going further, trying to figure something out, trying to solve a problem, trying to plan that lesson even better, trying to get the grading done. We don't say, no, I need to do these things later, or not at all sometimes, because we've got that culture of sacrifice. I like that term, culture of sacrifice. I think what also, like, I struggle with is just not seeing others step up. And sometimes it's just easier for me to do things myself. So that's, again, my own problem that I've got to work through. But I struggle a lot of times with, I'll just do it myself. Or maybe somebody doesn't do something the way that I would do it, so I'll just do it myself. And, unfortunately, I create my own problem at that point because I can't let it go sometimes. It's kind of a control thing for me. So, and that jumps right into, what does it cost at that point? When you don't say no and you just keep going and going and going and giving and giving and giving, what is the cost? Well, let's talk about personal costs for a minute. I mean, I think the biggest thing that we run into in anything is just burnout and exhaustion. You can only say yes so much before it's going to start taking a toll on you personally. You're going to have less time for other things. You're going to have less energy for your family. You're going to start feeling resentful, even though you're the one that volunteered. You're the one that said yes. So is it worth that personal cost that it's going to take over time? What about professional cost? Spreading yourself thin means that your leadership or your work is going to suffer one way or the other. And it might be just a little bit at the beginning, but as you continue to say yes to other things, it's going to spiral and it's going to have that toll, and it's going to affect your work, your leadership, and what you do. You're going to be less present for your staff and for students if you're in education, or maybe your coworkers. It's going to add up, and you're not going to have the time or the interest sometimes even in being with your staff and students, being present and being active and involved in what they're doing day to day. And by modeling overcommitment, that's really going to, it feels like it's a double-edged sword. If you are exuding that, hey, team spirit, let's go and let's all pitch in and let's, do this and do that. And then, your teachers take a hold of that, or your staff members or your coworkers, they jump on board with that. Again, it's going to create an imbalance in everybody's life. So instead of that overcommitment, we need to start modeling balance. We need to be able to step away and say no sometimes. And I know that there's people out there that are really, really good at this. Again, I'm just not one of them. And I feel like maybe it's even a generational thing. I feel like people my age, and I'm in my 50s, I'm not afraid to admit that, I feel like it's harder for us maybe to say no sometimes. I feel like the younger generation, especially maybe younger educators, it's a little bit easier for them to say no for some reason. I don't know if that's something they're teaching them in school and colleges, but I know, like for me starting out, if somebody asked me to coach a sport, I'd coach it even if I didn't know what I was doing. I remember I coached cross country. I didn't know how to coach cross country. I mean, I know it's running. How hard can it be? And I think that's what I was thinking. But, I didn't say no. I coached basketball. I coached softball. I didn't know the first thing about softball when I first started coaching. I said, yes, let's do it. And hey, do you want to be on this committee or do you want to go to this PD? And I just feel like, for me, I just said yes, and I would do it. I don't think I ever turned any of those opportunities down. And maybe that's my problem too, is that I'm looking at things, no matter what they are, as an opportunity versus, maybe something that really isn't an opportunity and it would be okay to say no to because it's not going to cause me any problems if I just walk away from it versus saying yes and going through with it. But again, there is definitely a professional cost when it comes to the end of the day when you continue to say yes, 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 bring it on, give me more. I think one of the most important costs and one that really cause a lot of hurt is your relational cost. Like, what is it? Your commitment to all these things, what is it doing to you and your relationships, whether that's your spouse, your children, loved ones, whatever you want to call it, when you're always tired or unavailable? It's going to take a toll and a hit on your relationships. And that's probably the one thing that I've really been thinking about in my head, and I haven't had the conversation with Sherry or the girls or whoever. I feel like because I'm not saying no and I'm saying yes to a lot of things and taking on more things, it's obviously, again, taking away from them. But I'm starting to wonder and asking myself, how is this impacting them? How are they feeling when, dad or husband's not here? And if he is here, he's exhausted and he's tired and, doesn't want to do anything. I've got to really stop and think about that. What's the benefit of saying yes if the outcome is causing stress and bad feelings between me and my loved ones? I don't want that, even though I'd said yes, and it's creating that animosity there. So I know it's taking a toll, and I will say that my girls, all three of them, Sherry and Maddie and Meredith, they never complain. They never question. They support me when I do say yes and take on these things. And I love them for that, but I need them to know that I love them enough to start saying no, or at least trying to say no a little more often. Saying no isn't about shutting people out, and I have to remember that as well. To me, and for you, it's about making your yes more meaningful. How can we make saying yes more meaningful and feeling less guilty about saying no? I think it's all about healthy boundaries that you can create, like just being focused on what is important right now. Is it, taking on this extra responsibility or, making a few extra bucks if I do this? Is that my focus, or does my focus really need to be, with my family and my friends and things like that? It's setting boundaries as far as longevity in your career and stronger relationships. Again, if you're saying yes to a lot of things, it's going to take a toll on your career, your relationships. So is it really worth it? Again, I think being able to say yes is going to be more meaningful down the road than it is to constantly worry about how you're going to make somebody feel if you say no. And maybe we just need to look at reframing it. Like, no is not about rejection. It doesn't have to be about rejection. It's actually maybe more about protection and protecting you and protecting the others. I kind of like looking at it that way, and maybe that would make everyone feel less guilty about saying no sometimes. I like that. It's not rejection, it's protection. So let's think about some practical strategies that we could put into place that would help us say no and help Brad say no and help you say no. One thing that you can do is just ask yourself, if I say yes to this, what will I be saying no to? That's so spot on. If I'm saying yes to this, what's getting put to the side? What's not going to be able to get done? Who am I alienating because of this? What will I be saying no to? That is a huge reflective piece that I think if you could ask yourself that and do ask yourself that is going to be so important. I think for me, I don't give myself the time to really process a yes or no response until it's too late and I've already committed. I need to probably tell somebody like, let me think about that. I appreciate your offer. I understand what you're saying here, but I really need to think about this before I commit to it. Then I can start doing some of these strategies like, what am I saying no to if I'm saying yes to this? And that leads right into that. Give yourself permission to pause before you commit to something. That is so important because I think if you do take the time to really stop and reflect about what's being asked of you, whether it's time commitment or your services that you're going to be providing, whatever it is, what are you committing to? What are you really, really, really committing to by saying yes to this? And again, what is the cost of that? What's the benefit? What's the cost? Being able to use a soft no, like for example, I'd love to help, but I don't have the time right now. That sounds great, but I can't give it the energy that it deserves. I think those are really, you're not saying no with the word no. You're saying no by giving a little more rationale, actually. And it's not that you're making something up. You're being totally honest. I just don't have the energy right now. I just don't have the time right now. I don't have the extra time to commit to this. I love that strategy, and I think that could go a long way too because it takes away from feeling guilty of just saying, no, I can't do it. But again, it gets the message across, and I think people will honestly respect those kind of answers that you give them. I think as leaders, myself, other principals, even teachers, we need to model this for everybody. Just being able and allowed and feeling comfortable to do that, to say no when it comes down to it, and to give rationale for why you're saying no. If we don't start doing this now, I think it's just going to spiral out of control for everybody. And I feel like that's kind of where I'm right now. And I wouldn't say I'm out of control, but I don't know that I'm in control either. So, for me and my own struggle of saying yes all the time, there's times here recently where I've said yes to taking on either more responsibilities, more side gigs, side hustles, whatever you want to call them. And, at the end of the day, we're all focused on money, unfortunately. We never have enough of it, especially these days. I feel like, nobody's making the money that they should be. Things are costing more than what we're making. So, it's even for people in professional jobs like myself and Sherry, she's an oncology nurse. I'm a school administrator. I feel like people probably look at us sometimes and be like, they should be fine. And we're fine. I'm not saying we're not, but there's times where, would I rather have more money in my bank account? Absolutely. So what do? You take on jobs and you try to, save that money by taking on those extra jobs. So I've got to come up with some ways to, be able to take on some of those gigs, but not maybe to the level that I have been lately, because again, it's causing problems other places that I'm not sure that I'm seeing yet, but I think those seeds are probably there. I need to start saying no. And for listeners, I would want you to challenge yourselves and think of maybe one thing this week that you could do or should do to say no to. Maybe it's not in your face yet. Maybe it's coming up. But I think as the week goes on, take a moment, and when that moment hits you, like somebody comes to you and says, hey, I need you to do this, or hey, what would you think about doing this? Take that moment, give some reflection, and give yourself permission to pause before committing. I love that phrase, give yourself permission to pause, because when you do that, I think you're going to be able to get to that real answer that you want to give before the one that you feel like you want to give. And that, again, that just giving you that permission to kind of reflect and make sure that, is this something you really want to do? And reflect on what saying no might open up for you. Just in a sense of time and having time to devote to your loved ones and other things when you're not doing something else. And again, for me, a lot of it is the money motivation, just being able to have a little, extra income coming in is easy to say yes to. But again, what is that price that you're really paying for that extra income? Are you really gaining enough out of it to make it worth your time and your effort that you're putting into it? All right. I feel like this, I don't know that I answered anybody's questions here as far as being able to say no. I feel like I'm kind of all over the place because I'm really still struggling with the whole concept. And I think that's maybe what this episode is about, is just why it is so hard to say no sometimes. Again, some people can say it and walk right away. And I wonder how they do that sometimes. Like, how do they feel? I need to have somebody on here who is a no sayer all the time and just maybe get their rationale, their thinking. Like, how do you do it? How do you just walk away and say no? Because I can't do it. But I'm going to try to get better. I'm going to challenge myself through this episode. Try to find a way to figure out how I can be a little more assertive and just say no. Let's just go back to that campaign from the 80s. Just say no. Nancy Reagan would be very proud of me tonight, I think. So let's jump into some rapid fire questions because, it's interventions and detentions. And no matter what the topic is, we're still going to have rapid fire questions. They're my favorite. Here's the first one. Have I ever regretted saying yes to something? There was an example that comes to my mind right away when I was probably first year out of high school in college. A buddy of mine had like a lawn mowing business, and he did it by himself, but he said, hey, I could use some extra help. I'm like, yeah, I'll help you. And this dude is a worker, and he worked my tail off. And I did it for one day, and then I got really sick. And I don't know if it was because of the job, the weather, whatever. And he was wanting me to work, and I'm like, dude, I can't work. My throat's sore. I didn't feel good. I had fever, whatever. I mean, to the point that he came to the house to get me, like, you got to work. You said you were going to work. I'm like, I can't work. And thanks to my mom help kind of stepping in, she's like, he is not working. He's done. He doesn't need this job. Thank you, but no thank you. I mean, she was respectful, and I was respectful too, and I appreciated the opportunity, but I should have said no because, I regret that maybe it caused some animosity between he and I. We were good friends, and we still, if I see him, we'll still talk and stuff, but I'm sure he was not happy with me when I took that on and worked like a day or two, and then it's like, no, I can't do this anymore. I should have just said no from the beginning, like, hey, buddy, I can't help you out, but maybe try so-and-so. They're looking for some work or whatever. It would have been a lot easier. Rapid fire number 2, do you usually decide quickly or do you need time before saying yes or no? Well, I think I talked about this already. I think too quickly and I just jump right in and say yes. Giving myself permission to think about it, to pause and mull it over, telling somebody like, hey, I'll get back to you on that. Let me think about it. I'm interested, but I'll let you know what I want to do. Will probably make things easier in the long run. Is it harder to say no at work or at home? Whew. Well, I would say both for me, but I don't say no at work very often. Obviously, I feel like, my boss asked me to do something, I'm going to do it. I might push back a little bit, but most of the time I'm going to do it. At home, I'm just a pushover, especially when you've got a wife and 2 daughters. You're going to do whatever they want you to do. might not always be on their time or, when they want it done or whatever it is that they're asking of you. But I don't say no very often to my family. There is one time that I say no, and I might be covering that in another question here pretty soon. And if not, I'll come back to it. What's one thing that you'll always say yes to? My wife. That's easy. I'm going to say yes to her except for one time or for one instance. And she knows what it is probably right now if she's listening. But do you think people respect you less when you say no? I'll admit that's probably in the back of my mind. Like, man, I don't want these people to be upset with me, or I don't want them to feel like I'm, not trying to help them. So that, then they're going to lose respect for me or whatever. I'm sure that is kind of a subconscious problem that I have about saying no. So yeah, I do think they would probably maybe respect me less, even if they really wouldn't. I feel like that's probably part of the issue for me. Here's a simple one. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no? That's a no. I like pineapple and I like pizza, but I don't think I like them together. So there you go. Another quickie. Early morning meetings, yes or no? No early morning meetings, even though I have a lot in my line of work. And I'll take them on one by one, but I wouldn't say I'm a fan. So I'd say no. And I would also say no to end of the day meetings too. You want to have meetings during the day? Let's do it. End of the day, not so much. How about would you rather? Would you rather have fewer commitments with more energy or more commitments with less energy? Well, that's an easy one for me. I'd rather have fewer commitments and more energy. I think everybody would say yes to that. Hopefully, that makes a lot of sense to me. Jumping back to the one thing that I'll say no to my family is getting another pet or another dog or another cat when we already have like 3 in the house. So that's a hard no from Mr. Brad, and always will be pretty much until it's my idea to get one. So anyway, what did we learn today? I don't know that we learned anything other than the cost of always saying yes versus the power of setting boundaries is a big, complicated mess sometimes. So let's get better at saying no, maybe giving ourselves some think about it time before we commit to something. We don't have to say yes to everything. And for those of you that can say no right off the top of the dome, congrats. I wish I was you, but I can't. So, listeners, I'd love to hear from you guys when this gets posted on social media and you have a chance to listen to this episode again. Probably not the most exciting episode I've ever done, and that's okay. You can wait till next week and we'll come out with a better one. But I just felt a little bit of a calling to dive into this whole idea of, saying no. When it's all said and done, here's the truth. This is still something I'm going to be working on. Even as I sit here recording this episode, I can think of 2 or 3 things I've already said yes to that maybe I shouldn't have. It's not easy. It's not easy for me. It comes from, me wanting to help, wanting to be dependable, wanting to be the person that everybody can count on. But I've learned sometimes the most dependable thing that you can do is protect your own time and energy so that when you do say yes, it actually means something. And maybe that's the most important takeaway at this point. Let it mean something when you do say yes. When I don't say no, I notice, the consequences, having less patience with my staff or my family, less energy for both of them, family and home and school and work, less joy, things like that. So saying yes to everything doesn't make me a better leader. It doesn't make me a better husband or a better dad. It actually does the opposite. And those are the things that I'm trying to put in my forefront now, and I'm reflecting on a lot more lately. So if you're like me and you've been saying yes too much, here's my challenge for you this week. Find that one thing that you can say no to. It doesn't have to be huge. It has to be just one thing. I'm going to do the same thing. And then let's notice what happens because of that no. Look for that more time and more energy and more focus. And you might be surprised at how powerful that one word no really, really is. So with that, I thank you for listening today. Like I said, it's maybe not the most powerful episode, not the most entertaining episode, but one I just really felt I needed to talk about. And I don't even know if I talked about anything. I talked about no and I talked about yes. I'd love to hear from you. What's one no that you're going to say this week? Share it with me on our post, on our social media sites. Tag the podcast, Interventions and Detentions. I encourage you to give yourselves that permission to say no. Every no creates space for a better yes. Let's just leave it on that note. Every no that you say creates space for a better yes. And with that, we're going to cue up some music. Let's rock on out of here. Have a great week, everybody. Let's tune in again next week. I can't wait to see you for another episode of Interventions and Detentions, where the real learning begins. See you next week.